All right, hello everyone. What I'm going to do tonight is show you what I did to go from this image here to this image there, and it's quite surprisingly easy. This shot here was taken with one flash on a beauty dish, and you could probably tell where it was just by the looks of the shadow up there. And there was a window up on the left hand side for a little bit of ambient light, but that's a whole other discussion. What we're going to do here is show you what I did in post processing to achieve this picture here. So the first thing you can probably see is drywall marks, and really that's kind of ugly. We want to take those out, so that'd be the first thing that I would do. um, Not too easy to do in Lightroom. You can, but I still like to do that sort of thing in Photoshop. So I'm going to take this image by going Command E, and that will take me to straight to Photoshop. Give it a second here. So always duplicate your background layer. And I'm a big proponent of shortcuts, so I'll say which ones I'm doing here as I'm going along here. But first of all, I want to remove all these lines here, and it's pretty easy. Just hit J, and it'll take you to Spot Healing Brush, and you want to make sure that Content Aware is clicked on up here. So I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to be real sloppy here because I'm not going to bother with the corners here just for the sake of time. But basically, we're just going to go over top of all these here. I'm not going to do them all as I would to for a final product, but you can get the gist of what I'm doing here. Just basically be real sloppy and go over all the drywall lines, and you can take out all the screws and stuff like that. I left this in here. I kind of liked it, but you could take it out if you really wanted to. There's a big blue line here. Let's just take it out. Great thing about the Content Aware here is you could be fairly sloppy, and it is one of many ways to fix these sort of things. But given the way the lines are in this shot, this is by far the easiest way. So you can be as detailed or as sloppy with this as you like. I'm just going to get the main ones out of here so at least the final product looks fairly decent. Oops. And you see we have this big 2x4 up here, and sometimes Content Aware doesn't like the big ones, as you can see. It probably won't do a good job of it here too. And this is with, oh, okay, well it did, but there's a little bit of a blemish up there. Again, in Photoshop, there really is no one way to do anything. So I'm going to take the clone tool, and this isn't really a tutorial of how to do things. It's more of how I got a final image and what my process and how I do it. So what I'm going to do is just basically clone from here over here. So I grab the clone tool. You can hit S and it'll get to it, so I could have hit a bit S. And I want to sample a point over here, so I hold down the Alt key and I click, and you can see I find the edge of the top of the image. So basically I just hover over there and click on it, and that's it. We're done. So if I'm satisfied with everything that's been taken out here, it's almost, well, there's a couple more things up here, right up here and right down here. So I hit J, which takes me to Content Aware, or sorry, to Spot Healing Brush with Content Aware. And I just hit the left bracket key, which will make my sample smaller, and just go over it. And again, I'm being real sloppy because I've already finished the image and we're just going to recreate it here. So I've done that. So the next step that I would take, let's just go back to Lightroom here, in looking at this, is color temperature, which is basically would be the next thing I would do anyway. And I like to do that in curves. There's a ton of different ways you can do color temperature, but I've been using curves a lot. I'm not, like I said, this is not a tutorial of how to use curves and how to do white balancing in curves. So again, I'm just showing you what I do. So I bring up the curves palette, and there's an information. You hit I, and it will take you to an eyedropper tool, which samples all sorts of information on the curves, RGB and luminosity levels. And if you hold the Shift key down, what you want to do for white balance is to find what would be a white. What would you think would be white in the image? So I hold the Shift key down, and you can see that it turned. There's a little crosshair, and it's going to. Let's look around here. What's white? Sock. Okay, that's probably good because there's a blue in there, and there shouldn't be. So I'm going to click on that, and you'll see it gives me a sample here. Number 1, and these are my RGB values. And just as I suspected, blue down here, these are supposed to be equal, roundabout equal, in white and black. In different colors, they're going to be all different numbers, but in black and white, they should be fairly equal. So now I'm going to choose another point, which should be black, and let's look at his hat. And I hold on the Shift key, and I click again, and it gives me another sample. And we can see we're a little high in the blue here. So I got a sample point here, I have a sample point there. So all I'm going to do is basically even out these numbers. This probably will sound confusing, but basically I'm doing a white balance. So this is not a tutorial for white balancing curves, so I'm not going to explain it too much. I'm just going to do it. So basically I want to take number 1, which is the highlights, and I want to take the blue out. So I go to RGB, I go to blue, and I hit this handy little tool here, which is a grabber tool, and I go down to his sock, and you can see that B number, or B, up here, is changing as I drag this down. And I get it, I don't know, whatever, 126 is pretty close. You see the red is a little low, so I go over to red, still got my handy little grabber tool there, and I go back down to my sample, I click and hold, and I drag up. Basically, I'm just making these numbers the same. Now our white's okay, but our black is kind of all screwed up. Actually, it's not that bad. It's just a little saturated, but we'll fix the blues in here. So I'm going to go down to blue, and my grabber tool again, and I'm going to click and hold on my blue. I'm going to drag, okay, well I already did. This is called color correction. It's not, I'm going to do something later called color grading, which is an overall color change. This is color temperature, just making it look, the color temperature correct. It looks a little saturated to me, and I would want it a little less saturated, so I'm just going to go to hue saturation here and bring down the saturation a little bit. You can do it in curves, but this just, again, different ways of doing it. So basically drag it down till it looks good. So if we go to history, see what we've done so far, go right back up to the top. It's a little colder, and we go right back to where we are now. We've eliminated all these, and it's warmed up a little bit. Probably still a little bit too warm, but it doesn't really matter because I'm going to mess around with color grading in a bit anyway. So, oops. Okay, so I've done kind of a blanket color temperature and color temperature on in Photoshop. So basically I'm going to save this. I'm going to go Command S, and it's going to save it, and I'm going to go Command W because I don't want any changes I make in Lightroom to, when I bring it back into Photoshop, I don't want that to be in Photoshop. So now I'm going to apply an effect. We've got a little bit of highlights right there. See that in his teeth? So I'm going to bring that down up in the histogram to get rid of those little red blinkies, because we want to work within this histogram. Again, another whole tutorial. So I like Nik software. I use Nik software religiously, and I like detail. This is a little undetailed for me, and as if you see my stuff, it's pretty detailed. So if I right mouse click, I go edit in, and I use color effects 4. So let's open that up. Yeah, it takes its time. One of my favorites is called Detail Extractor, and which it comes up automatically. And look at the difference between if we're, where are we here? If I before and after. It just punches that out. With a guy, generally, I like to leave the detail in there, especially if it's a shot like this, uh, because I can, if I go minus here and take out that detail, it softens the face up a little bit. And with a guy, I'm not too worried about it, especially with a band shot. But if it's a wedding shot, and I'd like to take that detail um, out of a bride's face, because generally they don't like to look like that, especially screaming. So that's pretty much it. I mean, I can like add another filter, and I can add um, oops, not tonal contrast, vignette filter, put a little vignette on it. Might as well leave it on there. It's not as much as I want, but Nik software is great for this. So now what I've done is I've done the color temperature change. I've taken out a whole bunch of lines from the drywall in the background. I've taken in the color effects forward, added some detail to it. So I save it. And that's going to take me back to Lightroom. That's one good thing about Lightroom is I can pivot into Color Efex Pro. I can pivot into Photoshop and back, and it is where you want to be. So there we go. So see, this is the progression of the images. This is the first one, and with just a couple simple things. I mean, it's going to be. It doesn't take me this long when I'm normally doing it because I'm not speaking along with it. But here's our final product, and see we're coming along the way. But what can you see the difference here? Look at that. That's a lot bluer, and we're going to apply something called color grading, which is a feel to an image, and I'm actually going to go to that next. So that's what we have right now. So you can see how it's gone from the original image to this, what I showed you, and that's what I've already done before. So now I'm going to go back into Photoshop by going Command E, and if you remember, I closed the image in Photoshop because if I didn't, it wouldn't apply these changes from Lightroom. So I'm going to reopen it. And again, another lesson, but this is just my workflow of how I get to that image. Command E, open it up, and what I am going to do now is some color grading, and what that is give an overall feel, and there's one that I like right now. So I open curves again. Like I said, I've been using curves pretty extensively lately. I've been really studying it, and it's a fantastic tool for colors and everything in Photoshop. So what I generally will do, and it's actually a fashion color grading scheme, is I hit the RGB and go down to blue, and this little the bottom of this histogram here is your darks. So you can see, actually this shows it a bit better. If I go back to RGB, if I pull this this way, you'll see the whole image is getting darker. And if I go up to top, which is the lighter areas, and oops, sorry, if I pull it this way, you'll see them getting lighter. Again, you're gonna learning curves as a whole learning curve. Yeah, there we go. So what I want to do is go to the blues, and I want some blues in the shadows. So I've gone to the blue channel, and these are the shadows down here. This histogram represents the luminosity of blue from black to white. You see there's a lot of blues in the darker areas, not so much in the lighter areas. So by dragging this up, watch the blue in the black areas. I'm being dramatic about it here, but you can see the blues just really increase in the darker areas, not so much in the highlights because this is dark. So what I want to do is punch it up just a little bit. And as I go up this linear line here, it represents the lighter portions of the image. So I'm going to pick around about here, and I'm going to drag down, and you're going to see the opposite of blue is yellow. So when okay, if my mouse is going to work properly, if I drag this below this line through the middle, this virtual line, you'll see that yellow is introduced into the highlights of the image, but not into the blacks, is what that is down there. And I'm going to take the highlights up here, and you'll see before and after. Oops, let's go to layers here. That was before, which is color corrected, and we've added in there, we've got some yellows in the highlights, and I've added some blues in the darks. But I'm going to go to green and add a tiny bit of green into, actually, if I just hit the up arrow key, it'll do it even slighter. Is that a little bit too much? It's all taste. I mean, do whatever you want. That's what I say. It's art. Screw it if you don't like it. That's just too bad. All right, so I'm happy with that. Let's just sink that back in there. So this is before and after. I want to bring up his face, the highlights in his face a little bit. There are a ton of ways to do this. And one that I have learned recently is this technique here. Like I said, there's a lot of ways to do it, but I've actually liked this one right now. I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to fill that with white. So I can go Edit, Fill. And there are shortcuts for this, which I like to use. White. I'm going to fill the whole thing with white. So we just destroy the image. But if you open up the blending modes here, the layer style, sorry, there's something down here called Blend If. And I like to go to the underlying layer, especially if it's lighter tones like on the face. So basically I want to highlight his face right up here. So let's go back there, click it, and this slider here, you see as I drag it, oops, sorry, that's this layer, the underlying layer. It starts to reveal the lighter areas of the image, which is his face in the back there, but that's pretty harsh. So what we want to do is separate these two ones here, and if you hold the Option key down and then click, you'll see it comes in a lot softer. So there really is no rule here. You basically have to play with these sliders, bring the white up until you see how it's kind of highlighting the highlights on his face, and that is actually the white that we in that layer that we applied. So I'm just gonna, whatever, it's a matter of taste, and that looks good to me. So I'm gonna hit OK. It's a little harsh, but if you like it, you like it. So I'm gonna bring the opacity down a bit and see it seems a little more natural. And I can go into Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, whatever you pronounce it, and soften that up a tiny bit. And look at the difference. Look at the dramatic difference it makes in that image. And if we go back to Photoshop, oops, sorry, no, Lightroom, not Photoshop. And you can see I've added white into the finished image I've done before. Actually, I've done it. It's a little more dramatic in the picture we've done here. So let's go back to it. Let's leave it in there anyway. It doesn't really matter. Like I said, it's a matter of taste. Let's bring it down a tiny bit. Opacity. So here is with the layer off. Put it on. We've really made his face very dramatic. Okay, let's take it one step further, which I did not do in the other picture. You always have new ideas, and you start looking at the picture and you've already done it's like, oh, I could do this to it too. So let's take this same technique that we've done with the white layer over top of this and darken in here. So let's create a new layer and we'll fill it with black. Edit, fill, black. So use exact, so it's all gone. So now we want to double click on this to get to layer style again. And we're going to do the opposite. Instead of dragging the black sliders up this way, we're going to do the white sliders down here to reveal the darker areas in the image. And you can see very harsh, very sharp lines. So we'll drag that all the way back. And remember, hold the Option key down, keep it held down, right mouse click, and it will separate. You can let go and separate it, and it will give you a much smoother transition. So I'm going to drag it all the way down. So when you're seeing, this is literally what it's doing to the image. So let's do that. I guess that looks okay. So we'll hit OK. It's too dark, so I'm just going to take the opacity down. Okay, but I like what it's doing to his face here, but I don't like what it's doing down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a layer mask, this button down here. Hit that. White, reveal, and black is conceal. Again, a whole other lesson, but again, this is how I get to an image. I want to get rid of some of the blacks in there. So I could paint that away by, basically you take a paintbrush. If you hit B for brush, it'll take you to brush. And if I paint this black, this top one here is black, it'll, oh, let's take the opacity out. That's what's going wrong. I get rid of that effect that I've done up here. That could be a little more work than just painting on the black where I want it up here. So basically I'm going to click on that. I'm going to Command I, which will invert my mask. I could go edit fill black, but Command I like shortcuts. Now I'm going to take the brush and paint dark areas that I want in. I might want some down here too. So I can click on that and hit B for brush again, but you see that these are flipped around. That's the color of the brush right now. I want white. So I can click this button here, or I can go X, which is a shortcut and I use all the time. I'm going to use my opacity down to, I don't know, maybe half is a good start because you can go up and down from there. And see how I paint in the black. And I'm just making that image, here's without the layers, here's with the layers, just much more dramatic. And I can add it to his jeans. That's a little too dark, so I'm going to Command Z and backspace out of there. And I'm going to paint even lower opacity, which is more subtle than his face. I'll go around the edges. Whatever, you just, whatever, it's like paint by numbers. Adds a little bit of contrast. You could play with this for hours, which we're not going to do. But here we go. Let's just go back up to the top. This is what we came in with, was our color corrected image. It's a little warm, but it doesn't really matter because we've added a color gradient to it. And again, it's a personal preference. And we've added some highlights and darker areas, and we've color graded it to put the blues into the black, some yellows into the highlights, and a bit of green into the darks. So I'm going to save that. Command S will save that. It'll save that back into Lightroom, and I go Command W to get rid of it because I don't want that in Photoshop anymore. And let's go back to Lightroom. So there we go. That's we're not quite done yet because we are looking at this image. Okay, so we've got that. Yeah, it's still a little bit warm, but if we're in Lightroom here, we can do this in Lightroom or Photoshop, but up in the white balance here, I'm going to take the temperature down a tad bit because it was a bit too warm, and bands tend to look better a little bit colder, so I'm going to drag the temperature down a little bit, and I kind of like that. And I wouldn't mind a little bit more blacks in there. Okay, so that's a base image, and we're almost there. We just have to get there. See, this looks even a little bit warmer than this one here. Oops, what did I just do there? Okay, so I'm going to go back into Nik Software, and if you guys don't have that program, it's just fantastic because of all these. Viveza 2 is a selective editing. Silver Efex Pro is black and white. Define, I don't use that too much, but Color Efex 4 has got 52 or 56 different effects to it, and Analog Efex Pro is another one I've recently started using, and it can really mess up an image, so I'm going to click on that, and in a band image it's pretty good, but I'm not going to go into all of the different ones. I'm just going to pick one and make an effect to it that we think is good, because there's tons. I mean, you could spend hours doing all sorts of different kinds of. So okay, well, this is the one that I used on the last image I did, and look at the difference. Where do you turn it on? Okay, again, do a global one here. But all these different ones, I'm not going to get into it because it's a whole other sort of lesson. But this is the last effect that I used. There's lens distortion. Watch, it'll pincushion it in. Okay, actually, I kind of like that. Zoom and rotate blur. Again, we're not getting into this. I'm just hitting these buttons and see what happens. You see how it put a blur or a zoom into the edge. Dirt and scratches, just puts an overlay onto it. But, hold on, that zoom and blur. My center has to be his face because it was blurring his face. And let's drag this out. These are all control points, which I can control where the midpoint is and where it starts, different sections to how much that effect is applied to it. So let's close that. Light beams is another cool one, and there's just tons here. I don't think I'll pick one here, but That one looks okay. Let's take the strength down. That's what the strength at 100%. Let's go down a little bit. Just a subtle little, I don't like the red down there actually. So I might not even use that because red is a little bit, it's not a complementary color to blue and yellow. So let's take, be tonight, and the girl a couple houses down is knocking on the door. Is Caitlin here tonight? So I'd tell her no because she wouldn't stop knocking because she knows I'm here. What was the photo plate, lens, vignette, film type? Light leaks. Okay, I want to turn light leaks off. I'm not going to go into all these, so I'm just, that looks cool, sure. Let's just pick it. I hit save. Saving the image. And here's the one we're working on right now. Here's the one I've done before. They're fairly close. That one looks a little warmer, to be perfectly honest. I kind of like this one better. I just want to put their logo, and let's put it up there in the next one. So let's go back to the image we're working on here, Command E. I hate to say I don't know the PC shortcuts, to be perfectly honest. So I've been working on Mac too long. So I'm going to put this Wolfborn into this image here, which is pretty easy to do. I'm just going to, right mouse click, duplicate layer into that image. Just ignore all that, doesn't really matter. Not for this anyway. And I have got Wolfborn up on the top left here. There's incompatibilities, so basically what I'm going to do is rasterize this layer. Basically, it just flattens the thing out. And I'm going to go Command T, which gives me transform box, and I want to make it bigger. If I just hold the mouse down and click it like that, it's going to give a whole bunch of different wonky shapes, and I don't want that. So if I go Command T and I hold down the Shift button, and I drag that corner, it will keep the aspect ratio, and that's so we want it there. You can play around with all sorts of different layer styles here. And let's keep it normal. Let's take the opacity down. It's a little too dominant. A tiny bit more. Okay, so you can see what we've done in a relatively short amount of time. Command S, and that'll save that image back into Lightroom. Command W, that will basically take it out of Lightroom. Let's go back, or sorry, Photoshop. Let's go back to Lightroom. And there's the image, and then just those few relative steps from this image to this image. We've done color correcting. We've taken out the lines of the drywall. We have done color grading, which applied a blue tint to the dark and yellow to the highlights and a tiny bit of green in there. We've taken it into Nik software. We've done detail enhancements. We've had it in Photoshop. We put highlights in his cheek and some darkness in the other side of his face. And you just have to think of the light falling on this here. This is going to be dark in there, so it really adds a lot of drama to it. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, I kind of like the new image a little bit better than the one I did before, so I'm going to keep it. So that's it. I will be doing many more of these in the future. So that's pretty much where I got from this picture to this picture. And if you have any questions, Facebook is a great way to get a hold of me. Just give me a message. All right. Thanks, everybody.